Well, what we look for primarily, I think, is a level playing field. So if there are aspects of new businesses in digital or otherwise that aren't that means that if they're not treated the same way, there isn't a level playing field, then that concerns me. And I think very importantly in our industry, rightly or wrongly, in many ways rightly, we're quite a regulated industry. If you stay in a hotel that is part of a brand or otherwise, there are things that you can expect in terms of fire life safety and construction quality, whatever it might be. And that's true across the world, that's not just true in the US. And I think a business that puts itself out there as a major player, in fact, their whole publicity spiel as they drive up the IPO valuation is we're bigger than Hilton and IHG and by definition Marriott. So they're out there as a brand, and I think so from that perspective, I think it's important consumers are protected and understand. There's a whole issue about taxes paid or otherwise, and I don't know the ins and outs of it, but clearly we pay a lot of taxes as companies, as the individual hotels in terms of tourism taxes, sales taxes, and so on, and those are important contributors. So from my perspective, ultimately we'll see how that goes. It's a very, very tiny piece of the business today. It doesn't really impact us directly. If it's going to grow and there's an opportunity for a proper brand to be in there, I'm sure it's something we'll look at.
I think there are pieces of it which are a new take on an old business. It makes perfect sense for them to be in it, and they're sort of reinventing it, and I think they deserve a lot of credit for what they've done. So you think about renting a vacation home someplace, this has been something that people do for a long time, and to be able to do it on a technology platform, I think makes sense. I think you get to the urban markets and you look at the shared occupancy places, so where a host is opening up a second bedroom or even a sofa maybe. That looks like the classic definition of a shared economy, and I think is quite distinct from the space that we're in. I think it is cheaper. I think it's much more local, and probably not a terribly big threat. But when you start to see folks take 5 or 10 or 20 apartments in a residential building in downtown New York and have their business be simply renting out apartments on AirBnB or on one of their competitors, I think then you start to get into a space which is different, and I think it raises all sorts of questions. Richard talked about some of them. That sounds like a lodging business. They should be paying taxes. They should probably have life safety. They should probably have disabled rooms. But you got questions around housing policy too. So you think about the cost of residential real estate in New York. Do we want, as a city, do we want as a society to have a bunch of apartments pulled off the market for residential uses to run, in effect, a kind of unregulated hotel-like space? And I think you start to get in that space and it looks different, it feels different. It arguably, if it continued to grow, could be more threatening to the traditional lodging space. And I'm not sure whether they really want to be in that space or not. I mean, I think that's, you've got to give them credit for the success that they've had. I think the hosts particularly love it, and I think to some extent they're seeing people come in and say, oh, wait a second, I can do this and create my own little virtual hotel, and we'll have to see how they manage that space.
I think another concern along the lines of what Richard brought up is that it is doing nothing to create jobs in the lodging industry. And as we all work very hard in our local economies to create good jobs, as I mentioned in my brief remarks, but also pay taxes and have the men and women who work diligently for us understand their responsibilities to their families and their communities, and they do pay taxes and we pay taxes for them, that we need to be cognizant of how important our tax dollars are to the cities and towns that we operate our hotels and create more jobs.